We all know that August marks the start of transfer season. Julian Alaphilippe is the latest big name on the road to switch teams. He decided it was time, instead of ticking over where he was, to go and join Tudor. But the biggest news we've had this month has been that of Matthew Richardson. This week he announced he was changing nationalities from Australia, where he's been living since the age of 9 and for whom he won 3 medals at the recent Olympic Games, to the land of his birth and Great Britain. So, who better to tell us the story, despite all the noise in the media, the ire from Australia, than Matthew Richardson himself? He was speaking to Matt Stevens.
Matt, great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us here at Eurosport. Congratulations again on your success in Paris. But let's be honest, what we do want to talk about as well is your shift from being an Aussie representing Australia to Great Britain. Can you just go back and discuss and talk about the genesis of that decision? When did it first come into your mind?
It first came into my mind when I raced for the first time for Australia at Junior Worlds. And I was racing, obviously, internationally in Montechiari in Italy. And I kind of looked over at the GB pit and I thought, I could have been there, and just thought, this feels quite strange. And obviously never hesitated once when racing for Australia at any competition or at any point in the last 7 years. But that was kind of the first thought of, what could possibly be if I hadn't moved to Australia and I was racing for GB. So yeah, that's probably the first thought that came into my head.
I guess that's quite a natural thing as well. If people, scratch the surface and start to understand where you were brought up. You spent the first 9 years of your life living in the United Kingdom, didn't you? So I guess that feels naturally like it's your home, and that's quite a natural reaction to think, well, I could be racing for Great Britain. Is that where you think it's come from? It's a natural reaction to your current situation?
Yeah, 100%. Whenever I'd fly back into the UK, whether it be for racing or visiting family, I'd come in and admittedly see all the rain and the cloud and the grey, but think, this is home. Yeah. And that really stuck with me. And every time I'd race in the UK, whether it be in Glasgow or at Commies or at Track Champions League, it would feel like a home crowd because I just have so many more supporters in the crowd, given that all my family are still here in the UK.
How did you get the wheels in motion, basically? Who first made contact? How did you actually start the procedure or steps? Yeah,
so I approached John Norfolk in Adelaide when they came over for the Nations Cup in January this year, and that basically started the conversation of, what's the possibility of coming across and racing for Great Britain after the Paris Olympics.
And what was his reaction to that? Was he surprised? Was he like, did he receive that with like open arms? How did that conversation go? Were you quite nervous as well?
Yeah, I was really nervous because I've been thinking about it for so long that this could be a possibility, and basically decided in December, the month before, that this is something that I was going to do. So there was a lot riding on that conversation, whether my dreams were about to get shattered or whether he was going to try and help and support. So yeah, he's a pretty chill, calm bloke. So he was kind of, Right, okay, yep. And then we just had a very honest, open conversation about what that might look like and the future steps.
Had you spoken to anybody else, or was it all kept inside? Because obviously there are some risks in doing that. Like the Australian Federation have obviously got certain issues which have been out in the press. So were you aware of all that sort of stuff? Did you do some research beforehand in relation to the potential risks?
Yeah, I'd done some research a few years ago when I was thinking about the potential of this happening at some point in my career, and that actually initially stopped me in my tracks and thought maybe this is going to be too hard to do in the future. But yeah, December I sat down and talked with my parents, so they were the first ones to know that I was thinking about doing this, and that was basically it. Mum was quite worried about the risks involved with people potentially finding out and that having an impact coming into the Olympics. But yeah, Dad was pretty keen on it, and he liked that it was a bit of a rogue move and something that could impact and potentially benefit in my career.
And how did you? It's an interesting one because it's such a significant shift. But from a competition point of view, as you just said, leading into the games, keeping that to yourself, especially with teammates that you inherently trust, especially in an element of the sport that's very, very complicated. It's based on trust. Is the team sprint. How did you manage to keep that away from the people that you were very fond of and that you trusted, and remain 100% focused on the job at hand, which is winning medals for Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it was a challenge for sure. I trained with these guys every day. One of the riders, Tom Cornish, I actually lived with at the time, so it was super tricky to not kind of let the cat out of the bag. But I was sort of meticulous with how I went about training and things like that. So my mental focus stayed on the job. It was, there was always the thought in the back of my mind that obviously post games I won't be riding for Australia anymore, but I used that to motivate me to seize every opportunity and every moment that, this is the last time I will get the opportunity to race for Australia, and, that'll be something that I never get back. So I used that as sort of, the final hours to do the best I possibly could.
Yeah, looking at your performances and obviously the joy written on your faces and the success that you had, there wasn't any issue. You did commit 100%, didn't you?
Yeah, and that was probably where the pressure lied,
because
I knew that if I underperformed, people would probably make the comments of, his mind wasn't in it and all that sort of stuff. So that was probably the hardest thing, knowing that, I had pressure of winning Olympic medals just for my own personal joy and achievement, but also to protect against, any doubt that I gave it my absolute all.
Can you tell us what you discussed or not discussed maybe with the Australian cycling before the decision? Did you speak to anybody at all, or did you just keep it all in and then just told them when they needed to know?
Yeah, no one knew anything at all.
Right.
Yeah, no one knew anything.
How did that conversation go when you did?
It was actually quite positive. I think that was testament to the relationships that I built with staff and people back home in Australia. So yeah, they were actually quite good conversations, which they were probably the most nerve-wracking of them all, more so than John or anyone else. It was obviously kind of talking to your coach that, I'm leaving and that's going to be it. And they wished me well and hope that, everything continued nicely. And, we all thanked each other for the memories made and the hard times had. So yeah, it was quite positive.
And I'd imagine as well, there would have been a big weight off your shoulders, because from what you've said, you've had that burning desire to move for several years. So to finally say it to the people that you've been very close to must have been a big relief.
Yeah, big time. I mean, it's really surreal that it's actually happening, and I don't still quite believe it. Maybe in a few months when I'm in Manchester, I am training in the GB skin suit, things might start to sink in a little bit more, but I think this is going to be something that feels very foreign for quite a while. I spent a long time training in Australia with the Australian team, so it's going to be a little bit foreign, it's going to be a little bit weird, but I'll always bring myself back down to, this is my dream, this was what I wanted for so long, and I'm living it, and it's going to be pretty cool.
What about there are some logistical issues still to be resolved, aren't there? Apparently the process with the UCI was pretty straightforward, and they're in full agreement. Obviously the people that you're close to, Australian cycling have been good about it, but a little bit higher up, there's a possible period of like non-competing, isn't there? So how is that looking at the moment?
So my understanding is the UCI regulations, which is what I, signed in agreement to swapping nations, which is I have to miss the first or consecutive World Championship and European Championship, and that's all. So whatever else comes is out of my control. That's sort of a wait and see, to what people are trying to cook up. But as far as I'm aware, the rules and regulations that I signed over are just those two.
And those regulations, those slight barriers, you've got your head around those, just missing a World Championship, you don't think it's going to adversely affect the next Olympic cycle, basically, because that's what we're looking to now, isn't it? We're looking towards Los Angeles.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why doing it now was almost perfect timing. If the World Championships were before the Olympics, I would have had to have missed next year's Worlds, which would have been a little bit more complicated or a little bit more of a headache with, training for that long to then not be able to race, whereas this is a bit of a time period where I can take a bit of a holiday and not race World Championships anyway, regardless of the nationality change. So it kind of falls into place quite nicely. The Europeans will be a little bit more of a sting. I would have been training for a few months with the guys, and they'll probably head off and go race, and I would want to come with them, but I can cheer from back home in Manchester.
And what about the opportunity then of working with a real Olympic legend, Jason Kenny, as your coach? You must be really pumped about working with such an icon.
Yeah, big time, big time. I actually, after the Kieran final in Tokyo, rushed down to the pit to get him to sign my race number from someone who just made history, winning 7 Olympic gold medals. So yeah, again, another pinch myself moment that now Jason is going to be my coach, and I'm really looking forward to it and seeing what we can do together.
And how far do you think you can go? I mean, was that one of the reasons, apart from just feeling that natural pang to race for what you consider to be your home country? It must have been a fact that the kind of R&D, the coaching staff, the whole backroom side of it, from the Great Britain side, that must have had a really big allure as well.
I mean, I think anything else that comes with it is a bonus.
Right.
You know, I understand the sport. Like, I've been in it for long enough to understand that equipment makes a difference. Possible race opportunities in Europe make a difference and all that sort of stuff. But the underlying thing was that it was just my dream. And anything else is a bonus. Anything else on top of that is just a piece that comes with it. And that, you know, the main thing is that I'm chasing a dream.
And what has I've seen, I mean, what has generally for you the reaction been from Aussies?
Not so good.
Okay.
Not so good. Yeah, a lot of bitterness.
That's because you're good, you see, because they love you, they don't want to lose you.
Yeah.
So the fact there's that shows that, they cared about me, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that matter are the ones that are supportive.
Yeah.
You know, and all the negative comments and hate that's been getting thrown around are from people that probably don't even know what sport I play.
Okay.
You know, I can sit here and probably challenge a lot of them to tell me what a Kieran is and not know without having to Google it. So, you know, these are people that, you know, sit behind their keyboards and do nothing other than just bash meaningless words into the computer. So for me, it doesn't matter. And I've got a really big support back home. Midland Cycle Club have shown their support and welcome me back with open arms whenever I'm back in Perth. So yeah, I've got a lot of people and I feel a lot of love. So they outweigh all the negativity.
What do you think you're going to need to start to challenge the Dutch, because they have had a tremendous games, haven't they? And that's your target, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the question a lot of people are asking themselves, not just myself. Yeah, it's just going to be, you know, training consistently. That's always what it boils down to. Whatever piece of equipment get thrown into the mix are just add-ons. You know, it all boils down to that consistent training. Being in British cycling might allow me to open new doors to different training stimuluses and new ideas. Maybe a bit of a collaborative effort can happen here, and we can hash out the best training plan possible and see where that can take us.
It must be really interesting for you, because the margins now, although riders are getting faster and faster, it's only to a point, isn't it, that the margins are narrower and narrower. So it must be quite exciting trying to find within that very finite space opportunities to improve.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I went like 9.5 in a flying 200 when I was like 19 or something like that, and continued to do 9.5 every year, 9.5, 9.6, something like that. And then all of a sudden you pop out of the Olympics and go 9.0. Like, so you think you were reaching the limit, and then you find another one. Like, I skipped 9.2 and 9.1 and just jumped all the way to 9.0. So just when you thought you've maximized everything, you'll just all of a sudden get a lot faster. So where the limit is, I have no idea. I'll just keep training.
That's quite cool, though, isn't it?
It's super exciting. Like, think, like, I was like, man, how can I get faster than 9.5? I just can't do it. And then all of a sudden you just make a massive jump and everything kind of falls into place. So where the limit is, I don't know. And, you know, I'll just train as hard as I possibly can.
It sounds like it's going to be a very exciting next few years, that's for sure. But just reflecting back, what do you think was your favourite moment riding for Australia, though?
That's a good question, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
There is a lot of them. One of my best moments on my bike is the Commonwealth Games when I won the individual sprint title. That was something else. I think, you know, a bit of underlying racing in front of the London crowd was pretty special. And I said to friends before that, you know, I want to make as many unforgettable moments in my track cycling career as possible. And I just think, what if I was English at that Commonwealth Games? What if I was British at TCL when I won in London? You know, it was already an unforgettable moment, and it would have been made even more so if I was racing in front of a home crowd. And that's what I want to do in my life. But yeah, bringing it back, the Commonwealth Games individual sprint title was one of my best memories ever. Very
cool. And do you have a message for Australian cycling as well, who, again, we've got this ambiguous period, haven't we, where you're still waiting for a decision. Do you have anything to say to them, or are you happy and content to just let this ride out?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy and content to let it kind of ride itself out. I have no bitterness or harsh words towards Oz Cycling. You know, they supported me for my whole cycling career up until now, and you know, I really did give my best for them and brought home as many medals as possible. So I just hope that they understand my decision and can appreciate, you know, everything that I did for them as well.
You're going to be moving into the GB Sprint team at some point. We know that. What do you think you can give them? They're already a very successful team, but adding you into the mix is obviously an exciting proposition. What specifically do you think that you can add?
I think I bring a lot of energy to the training group, so I think I can kind of bring in maybe a fresh mind on the outlook on training. You know, each nation will train slightly differently as well, so maybe a few different ideas on how to get the most out of themselves. But yeah, mainly just the energy. I'm keen to, you know, start almost a new project with a new bunch of people and see how far we can get.
And finally, what are you most looking forward to?
Chasing my dream.
Matthew Richardson and the rest of the stars of track cycling will be in action once again at the UCI Track Champions League as the very peak of the world of track cycling returns to your screens in the autumn. You'll be able to watch all 5 rounds live and on demand on Eurosport and Discovery+. The first round's in Saint-Quentin-en-Yvelines. Tickets are also available now for both the French, Dutch and London legs, all 5 of them this year. We heard from Matt Richardson there then. A privilege to get to speak to him, wasn't it, after what has been a whirlwind few days. I'm with Joe Rousel. Joe, it's not been long since we've been together at the Olympic Games, watching Matthew Richardson compete for Australia. I first got wind that it was all going to change thanks to you. Text message, WhatsApp popped up a couple of days ago, and you said something like, wow, this is something like a turn up for the books.
Yeah, I think I said, wow, this is big news. And yeah, I think it was a shock to a lot of people. From what I understand, not many people were aware it was going to happen. And it's a funny one because as commentators, you know, a number of times over the last couple of years, I've mentioned how he was born in the UK, and we've sort of made little comments about, like, I wonder how British he feels, and I wonder whether he'd ever race for the UK. And don't think any of us ever really meant any of that. But then you find out that sort of behind the scenes, he'd been thinking about this for a while. But yeah, my reaction was, wow, this is huge news. And it's something that I've actually been, you know, I thought it was huge news when I first saw it, but I've actually been surprised at the amount of media attention the news has got, the amount of media outlets that have picked up on it, the amount of social media attention. But I see all of that totally as a good thing. Like, for me, as a retired rider, like, obviously passionate about track cycling, really keen for people to be engaged in the sport. And now as a commentator, like, my job is to get viewers invested, make viewers care about these athletes. And I'm just sort of blown away by the sort of responses that have been going on, which I see totally as a good thing. People are invested in the sport of track cycling. People are invested in Matt Richardson. It's been a fascinating story of him versus Harry Lefrazen over this Olympic cycle, and, you know, how that rivalry would shape up at the Olympic Games. Obviously, Harry Lefrazen came out on top. But Matt Richardson has put himself right in the headlines. He's coming to GB. And overall, for the sport, I do think it's a fantastic thing.
OK, then. We'll get to the whys, the whats, the what might happen in just a minute, Joe, because I know you've been digging into the rules about eligibility, all sorts of stuff going on. Basically, what does this transfer change of nationality mean? How does it affect Australia? How does it affect Team GB?
Yes, so I believe the regulations are he needs to miss the upcoming World Championships and Continental Championships. They're due to take place in October, the World Championships, and in February, the European Championships. So that doesn't seem too much time to take out of competition. I believe he will be able to race Nations Cups and will be able to race the Track Champions League. So fans of track cycling will be able to see Matt Richardson in action very soon this winter. So I think a lot of people are excited about that. But yeah, it means he's relocating to the opposite side of the world to come over to race for the GB cycling team. It's a squad that's based up in Manchester. We have a central programme based around the Manchester Velodrome, which is a world-class facility, world-class coaching, support staff as well. So from what I'm aware, he'll integrate into that system up in Manchester, a system that I was part of for more than a decade. So very much aware of how things work up there. Not quite such nice weather as in Australia, I'm sure, but be a nice welcome to the UK for him. But of course, it's a very international sport, so you do spend a lot of time travelling. But yeah, from what I understand, he'll be Manchester-based with the GB cycling team.
Yeah, I can tell you as a Lancastrian, Joe, that Manchester is definitely not Perth. In terms of what he's going to gain, he's going to lose the weather, but of course he's going to get a world-class setup. Do you think that he stands a better chance of taking the competition to Harry Lavrace and anyone else who might pop up in the world of sprinting, being a GB athlete, as opposed to training in the green and gold and then competing as Australian?
That's an excellent question. And of course, I'm slightly biased in that I was part of the GB cycling team setup and I was very successful in that setup, as were my team and my teammates. So I can only really speak about my experiences there. I don't have that insight into the Australian system. Although what I would say is what I'm aware of from my position in the sport is that the Aussies also do have a very good setup. The Aussies really take their sport seriously. And there's been a very long, well-publicised rivalry between GB and Australia in track cycling for many decades, over many Olympic cycles. So I know that he's already part of a strong setup. I guess one of the attractions must be the sprint coach for the men's Great Britain cycling team is Jason Kenny, the most successful Olympian ever. And I guess one of the very few people ever to have beaten Harry Lavrace in an Olympic competition, because Jason Kenny took the gold medal in the Keirin in Tokyo, which is the one that Harry Lavrace didn't win. He got the double in Tokyo, not the triple. He got the team sprint gold with Hoogland and Vandenberg, and he got the sprint gold, but didn't get the Keirin gold. So one of the very few people that's ever beaten Harry Lavrace and is now going to be Matt Richardson's coach. So I would suspect that would be a strong pull. But overall, like I mentioned, it's a really world-class setup up in Manchester. Having a centralised programme does mean, you're all living in one place, you're all training in one place. He's going to be teammates with Jack Carlin, Joe Truman, Hamish Turnbull. He's got loads of sort of up and coming riders in the GB squad, male and female, in the sprint side as well as the endurance side. And it's really nice to have everybody all based together and all part of that setup. So I'm sure it's a setup that he will enjoy. But yeah, you can't ignore the fact that being coached by Jason Kenny, hopefully I would imagine would be a draw to the GB team.
Well, Matt was telling our own Matt Stevens, that racing at home was a big thing for him. Of course, he wanted to feel like it was racing at home. He alluded to that Track Champions League, and you talked right at the start of our little chat here now, saying that, when we were commentating on that, we were mentioning that he was born in the UK and what have you. But it now comes out that he would like to have that feeling of racing at home. That's something you're naturally going to get. This, a lot of the big events take place here in Europe, don't they? Track Champions League is just one of those, but there are going to be a lot of events naturally in UK. As someone who's done that, how important is it to race at home, and what sort of a boost will he get?
It's so special to race in front of a home crowd. And I'd also say, out of all the velodromes I've been at in the world, the crowd in the UK just seem to be the best. And it fascinates me how we consistently sell out velodromes in the UK. The national championships back in February at the Manchester Velodrome were sold out. And that was fascinating, because it wasn't that long ago, back in my day, where you'd have just a couple of parents and partners watching the national championships. But the sport has grown so much in the UK to the point where we can completely sell out a national championships. And of course, any bigger competitions, Track Champions League, if we have any major competitions here in the UK, always ever so popular with fans. And as somebody racing with that home crowd support, it is incredibly special, and it's something that you definitely shouldn't take for granted. And definitely in my career, because my first Olympic Games was a home one, that they really set a very high standard. So I was very lucky that I was able to experience that. Then a home-ish Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, of course being English, not Scottish, but it felt close enough to me. So it is, I feel really lucky that I had those experiences myself in my career, and I'm looking forward to him being able to enjoy that as well.
Let's get technical, Joe, because I know you like to analyse things. You've talked about the feeling there, what it's going to mean to him, the practicality of being in Manchester and, of course, working under the coaches. Is there room for improvement with Matthew Richardson? You watch him, you can see him up against Harry Lavrace, and are there more margins that he can push now, being in this new setup?
I think it's, as an athlete, you want to have a no stone unturned approach. And he's 25 years old now. He'll very, very much sort of around the peak of his career. If we look at the likes of Jason Kenny, Chris Hoy, they're retired in their 30s. it's not a long career that you have as an athlete. Even athletes that go on for multiple Olympic Games and, we praise and say, wow, isn't this athlete fantastic? It's still a relatively short career. And if you want to improve, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always got. I think that's the phrase. I might have mangled that slightly, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. So having being brave, being courageous enough to try something different is nature of a champion, someone that's willing to go out there, try something else, try a different coaching method, try a different training method, try a different setup on the bike, all those sort of things. If you just stick with, what worked a couple of years ago that might have won you a world title, it's not going to be the same at the next games because this sport is moving forward at such a rapid rate. We saw almost every single event have a world record broken at the Paris Olympic Games. Just one event didn't have their world record broken. You've got to be changing things. You've got to be trying new things because the sport is moving forward so fast. So I think, a change, not just a change of scenery, but a change of setup and a change of coaching methods, everything that comes with changing nationality, I would hope that would be a positive for him.
And Joe, you've been around plenty of sprinters, that they have to be confident. Matt Richardson has that and a heck of a lot of it. You could hear in his chat there with Matt Stevens about how confident he was, talking about exactly what you mentioned there, having the courage to make a strong decision like that, go all out for it, leave no stone unturned. He feels he's going to be in the best position to do that now. Now, in your opinion, does Matt Richardson have that stardust to be GB's next big name sprinter?
He definitely does, and he's one of the very few people that has beaten Harry Levreisen in anything in this last Olympic cycle, and that is rare that any sprinter on the world scene has been able to beat the man that has just won 3 Olympic gold medals. He really has got everything it takes, and the confidence is so important, and then it's putting all those pieces together: the training, the racing, the nutrition, the sports science, the physio, all of those sort of things. It's the full package, and being an athlete is very much a full-time job. It's not just a case of doing a bit of training and turning up at the race and hoping for the best. It's completely all-encompassing, and you have to be fully invested in it. And like I say, the courage to make such a bold move to the opposite side of the world, that must have been such a hard decision. And it's not an easy decision to make. It's not a quick decision to make. But to have the courage to do that and make that change, he really has got that star quality.
And certainly when you look at the backlash that's come from Australia, he must have known that, certainly in a nation with some really strong national sentiment and national feeling, a lot of pride in being Australian, especially in sport, that must have made it extra difficult for him to make. And we heard a little bit of that in his reaction talking to Matt Stevens there. Can you understand some of the Australian reaction? It has been very, very forthright and strong.
I can understand it to an extent. I think there is a difference in the national pride that we have possibly in the UK versus Australia. It's a really interesting one. I mean, if somebody asked me my nationality, I would say I'm British, and I represented Team GB at the Olympic Games. I have teammates, though, that if you ask their nationality, they wouldn't say British. They would say Welsh or they'd say Scottish. So already as a nation, we've got we're a little bit different to other nations. And I know that the Aussies love their sport, and I love that they love their sport. I love how much they invest in the Olympic Games, how much they invest in the Commonwealth Games, and they always bring their A game. And I love that for the good of sport in general. So I can understand it to an extent. I would say it's more about the individual, though, and I never want to see one of the best riders in the world out of competition for a prolonged period of time, because that's not a good thing for the sport. And also on that sort of transfer, from one nation to another, it also happens all the time with coaching staff. Like, so many coaches in the world of track sprinting have previously been part of the GB setup. We have Australian coaches in the GB setup. The sort of talent transfer among coaching staff is, it's actually a very small world, the world of track cycling. And it's almost surprising the backlash he's had as an athlete when you consider the sort of transfer of potentially like intellectual property around the different nations from the coaching staff, which again, I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. Like, great, if as a coach you want to go and work for a different nation, completely fine. My coach from the 2 Olympic Games that I did is now working for the New Zealand team who beat the GB girls at the Paris Olympic Games. And to me, that's all part of the sport. And of course, people move on, people do different things. So both GB and the Aussies have benefited from that over the years. And I just see that as part of the sport of track cycling.
And it's possibly because we race as nations in track cycling and not trade teams, that there's such a fuss being kicked up about this as well. To add a counterweight to all of the understandable passion and some of the understandable reaction coming from Australia, Matthew Richardson is British as well. He is a dual national. It's not as if he's picked a nation that has a fantastic setup on the other side of the globe and decided, no, I want to go there, as if he was moving from Real Madrid to Barcelona, or from a small team to a big team, or just going from one rivalry to another. He's a lad who has both parents who are British. He moved away at the age of 9, so he did begin to learn the language, the culture, everything else back in the UK. So he is British as much as he is Australian. So you can understand that. It's not as if he's just, put his finger on a map somewhere and said, right, I'm going there because they're better.
Yeah, exactly that. And, we've spoken a lot about his British roots, British family, and everything about his upbringing here in the UK in the early part of his life. The debate is how the Australian system has been able to nurture him and develop him as an athlete. But I still go back to the rider first, the athlete-centred approach, and, say you do have a short career and who you want to represent. When you're a dual nationality holder, when you've got 2 passports, it's up to you. It really is. And he's won medals for Australia at the Paris Olympic Games. They've got a brilliant set of results there for him. And of course, in part of the team sprint as well, they got the bronze medal. It was Matt Blates's first Olympic medal after many Olympic cycles of trying. So they've definitely had a huge amount of success with him. And I think for him, doing what's right for him is really important. And I'm glad that he's been able to make that choice and come here to the UK.
Well, we'll have to see what happens with the eligibility thing. It does seem like it's all up in the air, even though we heard from Matt himself. In his mind, it's sorted. But again, he sort of left the question mark to say, well, we will see what happens. We might have to see if the governing body is going to rule on that. If it all goes to plan for Richardson, for Great Britain, what does his next Olympic cycle look like then?
Yeah, so the Olympic qualification period begins 2 years before the Olympic Games, and it should include 2 sets of continental championships and 1 world championships, assuming that we have the same system as we had coming into Paris. So that means that the Super World, which will be due to happen a year before the Olympic Games, are due to have the same as what we had in Glasgow, but down in France, that will be the 1 world championships that's part of that Olympic qualification period. But there'll be 2 seasons worth of Nations Cups and 2 lots of continental championships. So that will be the real focus. Assuming he has to have 1 season out from the major competitions, there'll be then 1 season building up to Commonwealth Games if we are able to have a Commonwealth Games. Of course, that's we're still waiting for confirmation of a host city. I know Glasgow have mentioned they could perhaps be interested in that one. So that could be an interesting sort of first big outing at a major competition against the Aussies. But in terms of the Olympic cycle, the LA Olympic Games, it will be pretty much a 2-year qualification period. And GB as a squad always look at how best to spread their efforts over that qualification period. The qualification always involves a lot of travelling, and it's not straightforward at all to qualify for an Olympic Games. You're not guaranteed a place because you medalled last time or your team medalled. It's actually really quite hard to qualify. You have to do a lot of travelling, a lot of point scoring at a lot of races. So that will be the main focus in terms of getting those spots qualified. The best way to qualify is to get the team sprint squad and team sprint spot, and that gives you the places in the individual sprint and the keirin. So I imagine the team sprint will be the main focus for the GB squad going forwards.
Well, thanks, Joe, for your input as always. It's been quite the developing story, hasn't it? Almost as fast as his flying 200s. That might be about to get even faster now he's joined Team GB. We'd love to get your view on what's happened, the rights, the wrongs, the eligibility. Make sure you post below in the comments. Comment on our Instagram posts as well. It's at Eurosport Cycling. And at the end of this very special emergency edition of the Gruppetto, a reminder to share it with your friends, comment and like. Give a subscribe, if you will, as well at the Eurosport Cycling YouTube channel. I'll be back on Monday with the usual show, the usual recap of the Vuelta A Espana. We'll be having a look at what's happened at this Grand Tour that's been snoozing along the last couple of days, but that is about to get into action. For now, though, from the world of track cycling and transfers, from Joe, from Matt Stevens and Mr. Richardson himself, it's goodbye.